The wine hit my system like liquid fire that night. Let me paint you a picture of exactly what happened, because this moment, this single, crystalline moment, changed the entire trajectory of my life. I was sitting at the Sterling family's dining table in their Westchester estate. 23 pairs of eyes. That's not hyperbole. I counted them. The mahogany table stretched for what felt like miles, laden with gold-rimmed plates and centerpieces that probably cost more than my childhood home. Above us, chandeliers dripped light like expensive tears. I was wearing a borrowed dress, and everyone in that room knew it. The fit was perfect, sure, but there's something about borrowed luxury. It whispers. It announces itself. It says, "She doesn't belong here." Then Richard Sterling, my boyfriend Lucas's father, set down his wine glass with deliberate precision. The room quieted. You know that feeling when everyone senses something terrible is about to happen? That's what we all felt. "My son deserves better than someone from the gutter," he announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man accustomed to controlling rooms. "Street trash in a borrowed dress, pretending she belongs in our world." My fingernails dug crescents into my palms. The room blurred. His voice was somehow both muffled and unbearably clear, crystal clarity mixed with shock. I could see his country club associates shift uncomfortably. His wife, Margaret, froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Their daughter, Natasha, turned crimson. And Lucas? Lucas looked like someone had physically struck him. I did something I've never done before. I carefully folded my napkin, the fabric that probably did cost more than my first apartment's monthly rent, and placed it beside my untouched plate of overpriced Atlantic salmon. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Sterling," I said, standing slowly. My voice was steady. "That surprised me. And thank you for finally being honest about how you feel. My name is Cora. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a self-made entrepreneur. This is the story of how I transformed a public humiliation into the most expensive lesson a man could ever learn." Lucas grabbed my hand, his fingers trembling. "Cora, don't. Please." I squeezed his fingers gently, then let go. "It's fine, love. Your father's right. I should know my place." The smirk on Richard Sterling's face was worth memorizing in perfect detail. That self-satisfied expression of a man who believed he'd won, who thought he'd finally driven away the nobody daring to touch his precious son. If only he'd known the truth. I walked out of that dining room with my head high, past the original Monet hanging in the hallway. Yes, an actual Monet. Past servants who deliberately avoided eye contact. Past the Bentley in the driveway that Lucas had mentioned cost more than I'd earn in 5 years. I walked through the marble foyer, across the Persian rugs, and out to the circular driveway where my car waited. My sensible Toyota Camry. The car Richard Sterling had sneered at when I'd pulled up. Lucas caught me at the driver's door, tears streaming down his handsome face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I had no idea he would." I pulled him close, breathing in his cologne mixed with the salt of his tears. This moment felt like both an ending and a beginning. Neither of us knew which it would be. I drove away from the Sterling estate in absolute silence. My hands gripped the steering wheel. My mind raced. But underneath everything, underneath the humiliation, the anger, the sense of being violated in front of strangers, was something else. Something colder. Something calculated. By the time I merged onto the highway, my phone was already buzzing. I voice-dialed my assistant, Priya, as I drove through the dark Connecticut roads. Priya had been with me for 9 years. She knew my voice. She knew my patterns. She knew when I was angry and when I was about to do something extraordinary. "Priya, I need you to listen carefully. Cancel the Devereaux Industries merger." Silence. Long silence. "Ms. Cross, we are supposed to sign the papers on Monday morning. The due diligence is complete. Financing is locked in." "I'm aware. Kill it. But the termination fees alone will." "I don't care about the fees, Priya. Send the notice to their legal team tonight. Cite irreconcilable differences in corporate culture and values." Here's what Richard Sterling didn't know, and this is crucial to everything that follows. I don't work for Devereaux Industries. I own the company that Devereaux Industries was desperately trying to acquire. Cross Technologies. That's me. That's been me for the last decade. Growing up in foster care teaches you something valuable. It teaches you that visibility is dangerous. That power wielded openly gets taken away. But power wielded quietly? Power hidden behind holding companies and trusted executives? That power is untouchable. Richard Sterling had researched me, sure. He knew about the foster homes. He'd learned about the free lunch programs in middle school. He probably read about my night shifts at warehouses to pay for textbooks. But he'd made a critical error. He'd stopped his research at my past and never looked forward to my future. By the time I reached my penthouse in Manhattan, my phone was already lighting up with panic. The Devereaux CFO, a man named James Whitmore, was calling. Cora? It's James. We just received termination papers from Cross Technologies. There must be a mistake. No mistake, James. But the board approved this. Shareholders are expecting. Then your board should have thought about that before your CEO publicly humiliated me at dinner tonight. What did Richard do? You'll have to ask him. Good night, James. I hung up and poured myself a scotch. From my penthouse balcony, I watched the city sleep. Somewhere out there, Richard Sterling was about to have his entire evening ruined. I wondered if he'd make the connection immediately, or if it would take him a while to realize that the trash he dismissed actually controlled the one thing his company needed to survive the next fiscal year. By morning, I had 47 missed calls. Richard had tried reaching me himself 6 times. The great Richard Sterling. Reduced to repeatedly calling someone he declared trash. That alone was worth it. The financial press got the story by mid-morning. Bloomberg was already calling. CNBC wanted statements. The business world loves nothing more than a drama involving money, power, and the unexpected collapse of a billion-dollar deal. I was reviewing quarterly reports over breakfast when Priya called. The press wants statements from both sides. But Richard Sterling is in your building lobby. I nearly spit out my coffee. He's here? Right now. 20 minutes ago. Security won't let him up without your approval, but he's making quite a scene. I considered this. Part of me wanted to have him removed. Make him feel small. Make him wait in the lobby like the nobody he'd made me feel like. But I'm smarter than that. Revenge dressed up as civility is far more effective than simple cruelty. Send him up. But make him wait in conference room C for 30 minutes. I'm finishing my breakfast. Priya laughed. You're evil. I love it. I'll make sure we stock that room with the uncomfortable chairs. When I walked into conference room C 45 minutes later, Richard Sterling looked significantly less imposing than he had the night before. His usually perfect silver hair was disheveled. His tailored suit rumpled. The man who'd lorded over dinner like a king now looked like what he actually was, a desperate CEO watching his company's future evaporate in real time. He stood immediately when I entered. The gesture cost him. Cora, thank you for seeing me. I apologize for last night. My words were inappropriate. I sat down without offering a handshake. You have 5 minutes. He swallowed his pride like broken glass. I was drunk. I said things. You were honest, I interrupted. Drunk words are sober thoughts, Richard. You meant every syllable. You thought I was beneath you from the moment Lucas introduced us. You just finally said it out loud. His jaw tightened. Even desperate, even begging, he couldn't fully hide his disdain. What do you want? An apology? You have it. A public statement. You'll make one. Just let the merger happen. Why would I do that? Why should I do business with someone who fundamentally disrespects me? Because it's business. It's not personal. I stood up. Everything becomes personal when you make it personal, Richard. You researched me. You dug into my background. You found out about the foster homes, the free lunch programs, the night shifts at warehouses. But you stopped there. You saw where I came from and assumed that defined where I was going. You never looked at who I actually am. I walked to the window, gesturing at the Manhattan skyline spreading out below us like a kingdom of glass and steel. Do you know why Cross Technologies is successful? Because I remember being hungry. Because I remember being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. Every person we hire, every deal we make, every product we develop, I ask myself, Are we creating opportunity, or are we just protecting privilege? I turned back to him. Your company represents everything I built mine to fight against. Old money protecting old ideas. Keeping doors closed to anyone who didn't inherit their seat at the table. That's not a business philosophy, it's a disease. And I'm not interested in merging with a patient who refuses treatment. Richard's face had gone pale. This will destroy us. Without this merger, Sterling Industries won't survive the next 2 years. Then maybe you shouldn't survive, I said quietly. Maybe it's time for the old guard to make way for companies that judge people by their potential instead of their pedigree. I headed for the door. But he stood so fast his chair tipped over. What about Lucas? He demanded. You're going to destroy his father's company. His inheritance. His future. I paused at the door. Lucas is brilliant. He's talented. He's capable. He doesn't need to inherit success, Richard. He can build his own. That's the difference between us. You see inheritance as destiny. I see it as a crutch. He'll never forgive you. Maybe not, I said. But at least he'll know I have principles that can't be bought or intimidated away. Can you say the same? I walked out and left him standing there in that conference room with the uncomfortable chairs, staring at a future he'd never imagined. When I returned to my office, Lucas was already there. He was sitting in my desk chair, eyes red but dry, waiting like he'd been waiting his whole life for something he couldn't quite name. When he looked up at me, I saw his father's strength but his mother's kindness reflected in his face. I heard what you told him, he said softly. Priya let me watch on the conference room feed. I sat on the edge of my desk. And... He stood up, moving to stand between my knees. And I think I've been a coward. Letting him treat you that way. Making excuses. Hoping it would get better. Lucas, no. Let me finish. He took my hands. His fingers were warm. I've spent my whole life benefiting from his prejudices without challenging them. Last night, watching him humiliate you, I was ashamed. Not of you. Of him. Of myself for not standing up sooner. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you'll have me, I want to build something new with you. Without my family's money. Without their connections. Without their conditional approval. I pulled him close, my heart doing something complicated in my chest. Are you sure? Your father's right about one thing. Walking away from that inheritance isn't small. He laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in days. Cora, you just terminated a $2 billion merger because my father disrespected you. I think we can figure out the money part. I love you, I said, and I meant it more intensely than I'd ever meant anything. I love you too. Even though you just declared corporate war on my father. Especially because you declared corporate war on your father, he corrected, kissing me. My phone buzzed immediately. Priya again. Richard Sterling is holding an emergency board meeting. Our sources say they're discussing reaching out to you over his head. They want to renegotiate. I put the phone on speaker. Tell them Cross Technologies might be willing to discuss a merger with Sterling Industries. But only under new leadership. Emphasis on new. Lucas's eyes widened. You're going to oust my father from his own company. I'm going to give the board a choice. Evolve or perish. What they do with that choice is entirely up to them. He thought about this for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He won't go quietly. I wouldn't expect him to. This is going to get ugly. Probably, I agreed. My mother will cry. Definitely. My sister will write another terrible song about family drama on her indie album. God help us all. He smiled, and it was sharp and beautiful and dangerous. So when do we start? I smiled back. How about right now? That's how the nobody dating the prince became the architect of a kingdom's reconstruction. Not with a sword or an army, but with a simple truth. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned. And those who refuse to give it when it's due? They learn the hard way that sometimes the garbage takes itself out and takes everything else with it. The board meeting happened on Sunday night. I wasn't there, but I heard every detail through our network of contacts. Richard Sterling walked into that conference room expecting to control the narrative. Instead, he found a board that had spent the last 36 hours doing the math. The math that showed Cross Technologies holding 70% of the technology patents Sterling Industries needed. The math that showed their stock price collapsing by 14%. The math that showed survival was only possible through acquisition by the company, whose CEO their leader had publicly called trash. The vote was unanimous. They wanted to discuss terms. They wanted the merger. They wanted me. But they didn't want Richard. By Monday morning, he was no longer CEO. By Tuesday, Cross Technologies announced the merger with the newly restructured Sterling Industries. The announcement included a detailed press release about our commitment to diversity, opportunity, and disrupting the old boys club mentality that had defined the company for 40 years. By Wednesday, Lucas had accepted a position as our new head of strategic development. He turned down his father's desperate offer to fund a rival venture out of spite. Instead, he chose to build something real. Something earned. The business press went wild. This wasn't just a merger. This was a narrative. A story about old money meeting new ideas. About a woman who'd grown up with nothing proving she could have everything. About a son choosing his future over his father's legacy. Wall Street loves a good story, and this one had everything. Betrayal, triumph, love, revolution. By Thursday, Richard Sterling had learned the most expensive lesson of his life. Not just financial, though the financial hit was devastating, but personal. His son wouldn't speak to him. His wife had moved into the guest house. His daughter stopped returning his calls. His social circle, realizing which way the wind was blowing, began distancing themselves strategically. He'd gambled on status. He'd bet everything on the belief that where you came from mattered more than who you could become. And he'd lost spectacularly. The irony was exquisite. The garbage he dismissed didn't just take herself out. She took his entire empire with her, restructured it, and built something better from the rubble. 6 months later, Lucas and I were engaged. The ring was a simple white diamond on a platinum band. Understated. Elegant. Nothing borrowed. Everything earned. We were planning a small ceremony in Aspen, far away from Richard's social circle and all the ghosts of family obligation. Margaret had started calling regularly. Soft conversations about reconciliation and grandchildren and finding new ways to relate to one another. It would be a long process, but there was genuine warmth beneath the hesitation. Natasha, Lucas's sister, had actually written a song about everything that happened. It was surprisingly good. Funny. Self-aware. It charted at number 34 on the indie music charts, which thrilled her to no end. Richard hadn't contacted either of us since his removal as CEO. He'd accepted a position with a non-profit focused on community development, not out of charity, but because he needed something to do. Some people are wired to work, and Richard Sterling was one of them. Perhaps, in a small way, he was learning what it meant to build something rather than simply inherit it. The business world had already moved on to the next drama. But within certain circles, my name had become legendary. That moment at the Sterling estate had transformed into something mythical. The woman who'd built an empire in the shadows. Who'd changed the landscape of an entire industry. Who'd done it all by being underestimated. Cross Technologies was now worth $4.2 billion. We'd just launched our third product line. We were hiring people from communities that typically didn't have access to tech jobs. We were living our mission every single day. And me? I was planning my wedding to the man I loved, secure in the knowledge that I'd built this with my own hands. Not inherited it. Not borrowed it. Built it. The girl who'd slept in shelters and survived on free school lunches had become the woman rewriting the rules of an entire industry. A year after that dinner at the Sterling estate, I received an invitation to speak at Harvard Business School. The invitation came with a note. We'd like to hear your story. Not the press release version. The real version. I stood in that auditorium in front of 200 business students and told them everything. The foster homes. The hunger. The shame of borrowed dresses and knowing you didn't belong. The moment I realized that invisibility was power. The calculation behind every choice. The moment I decided that Richard Sterling's disrespect would become the catalyst for my revolution. I talked about earning respect instead of inheriting it. I talked about building companies that disrupt systems of privilege instead of protect them. I talked about the cost of revolution and the price of principles. And when I finished, the room was silent. Not uncomfortable silence. The silence of people recognizing something true. Afterwards, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 22. She had the look of someone who didn't quite belong in that room, and she wore it like armor. "I'm from the foster system too," she said quietly. "My social worker told me I'd never afford Harvard. That I should be realistic." I thought about Richard Sterling saying I should know my place. About a room full of people believing they could define my destiny. "What's your name?" I asked. "Maya." "Maya, do you want to know the secret? The real secret that nobody talks about?" She nodded. "People like us? We have an advantage. We understand what it feels like to be dismissed. We know what it means to have nothing. So we understand the actual value of everything we build. We don't take it for granted. We don't assume it's ours by birthright. We know exactly how precious it is because we had to claw our way to it." I handed her my card. "Send me your resume. Cross Technologies is hiring. And Maya? Forget realistic. Build something extraordinary." She left crying. Happy tears. That's what victory actually looks like. Not the moment you destroy your enemy. Not the press release announcing your triumph. Victory looks like a foster care kid realizing she's not defined by where she came from. That she can build something real. That respect isn't inherited. It's earned. Richard Sterling tried to make me feel small by calling me garbage. But garbage is biodegradable. Garbage returns to the earth and becomes nutrients for something new. Something better. Something that grows. And that's exactly what happened. I didn't destroy Richard Sterling's kingdom. I transformed it. I took his empire and restructured it into something that actually creates opportunity instead of simply protecting privilege. I took his moment of cruelty and turned it into my moment of revolution. The girl in the borrowed dress? She owns the dress now. She owns the company. She owns her future. And she's never looking back.